Welcome to the first public scoping meeting for the development of post-2026 operational guidelines for Lake Powell and Lake Mead. My name is Amanda Erath, and I am the post-2026 program coordinator. This is the first of 3 public scoping meetings. The second meeting will be held from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time tomorrow, July 18th. And the final meeting will be held next Monday, July 24th, from 6 to 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. You can join this meeting via Zoom or by calling in using the phone numbers provided at the bottom of this slide. If you need technical assistance during the meeting, please contact Jessica Sams at jessica.sams@swca. You see that email address at the bottom of this slide. And now I will turn it over to Meg Stone, who will go over some logistics for today's meeting. And thank you for being here.
Thanks, Amanda. Welcome, everyone. Before we go any further, I just want to let everyone know that we do have live Spanish interpretation throughout today's meeting. And if you would like to listen to the meeting using Spanish audio, you can click on the little globe icon in your Zoom controls that is labeled interpretation, and you'll be able to select Spanish as one of the listening languages. If you're listening in English, you don't need to click anything. I'm just going to pause now so that our Spanish interpreter can explain in Spanish how to find those that Spanish audio setting. And we're not hearing you. Looks like Rachel.
Thank you, Meg. This is Victor Hernandez, Spanish interpreter. I can take it from here. Muy buenas tardes. Gracias por participar en la reunión de hoy. Les queremos dejar saber de que ustedes pueden, se les va a disponer traducción al español de toda esta reunión, y para poder acceder el canal de audio en español, usted tendrá que hacer clic en lo que es un icono de un globo, es decir, un mundo, y después de eso seleccionar su idioma, que sería el español. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just give a moment for anyone who would like to select that Spanish audio option. All right, so wonderful to have you all with us. My name is Meg Perry. I'm with SWCA Environmental Consultants, and I'll be your facilitator for today's meeting. Just to give you an idea of what's coming up today, we will start with introductory remarks and welcome from the Bureau of Reclamation. We'll then move into a presentation from the team and then have time for public comments and a brief closing remarks at the end. A little bit of information about your Zoom environment, this Zoom webinar that you're currently in. As you saw when you signed in, this webinar is being recorded. Microphones are automatically muted as we have a very large group on today. And your chat feature is turned off, although we will use it to send you a few links and other information that you might want to copy and paste for your future reference. So you may want to have the chat open just to see those things coming in. If you would like to communicate with the team to share a clarifying question, you can click on the Q&A button, and that will allow you to submit a question to the team. So let me explain how that works. If you have a clarifying question at any time throughout this meeting, you can click on the Q&A button. You'll see a box pop up here in Zoom. You can type your question, click send, and the team will be responding in writing. You'll see responses coming in there in that Q&A box. This really is just for clarifying questions to help you provide more informed comments and make sure you're understanding the background presentation. So questions received today are not an official part of the project record, really just for your informational purposes. With that We'll now turn to a welcome message from Bureau of Reclamation Commissioner Camille Colon-Tootin. So bear with me for a moment while I start that video. And for those of you listening on the Spanish audio, you will need to, you'll probably want to mute the main audio so that that is not at full volume for the video. And you'll do that by clicking again on the interpretation button in your Zoom, and you should see a mute main audio option under that button.
Hello, I'm Camille Colon-Tootin, Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation. I welcome you to this vital public meeting on the process to develop post-2026 operational guidelines and strategies for Lake Powell and Lake Mead. The new guidelines will replace the 2007 Colorado River interim guidelines for lower basin shortages and the coordinated operations for Lake Powell and Lake Mead, which are set to expire at the end of 2026. This is a vital conversation in determining alternatives to protect the stability and sustainability of the Colorado River. It is important that we hear your views on a way forward for all stakeholders to achieve our shared goals of long-term sustainability in this basin. Reclamation, the Department of the Interior, and the Biden-Harris administration are committed to an inclusive and transparent stakeholder process that encourages meaningful engagement. This is a monumentally important task that must be undertaken in a cooperative, collaborative spirit. This ensures a thorough, inclusive, and science-based decision-making process that builds a more sustainable future for the basin. This process builds on Reclamation's commitment to have the tools and strategies in place to help guide the next era of the Colorado River Basin, especially in the face of continued drought conditions. You are a vital part of that process, and I'm grateful that you're here today.
Thank you. With that, I will turn it to Carly Gerla with Bureau of Reclamation to introduce the Reclamation team.
Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Carly Gerla. I am Reclamation's program manager for the post-2026 program. We appreciate you taking the time today to participate in the meeting. And as the commissioner just said, public engagement is very important to us, and you all are a critical part of the process. It is both a pleasure and an honor to be with you here today. And hosting this meeting, I am joined by Amanda Erath, who kicked us off. She's our post-2026 program coordinator, and Russ Calejo, who is our post-2026 environmental compliance project manager. We are also joined by Reclamation leadership and experts in both the Upper Colorado Basin region and the Lower Colorado Basin region, all comprising the post-2026 team. At this point, if those Reclamation folks can come on and turn on their cameras and say a quick hello. And I'd also like to recognize that we have our regional director of the Lower Colorado Basin region, Jackie Gould, on with us today. Thanks all. Before receiving any scoping input or comments that you may have, we would like to provide a brief presentation. I will begin with an overview of the project background, setting, and need, and then we'll provide an overview of the key operational agreements that the post-2026 process will be developing the successor agreements to. I will then hand the presentation over to Amanda and Russ, who will describe the post-2026 process and scoping before receiving any comments you'd like to provide today. To start, I would like to set the stage by describing the operational setting for those not familiar with the Colorado River Basin. The basin spans a large portion of the western U.S. The Colorado River and its tributaries flow through 7 U.S. states and then into northwestern Mexico, and provides essential water supplies to approximately 40 million people, nearly 5.5 million acres of agricultural lands, and habitat for ecological resources throughout its journey from the headwaters of the Green in Wyoming to the Gulf of California and Mexico. In the basin, 30 tribes consider the river and its tributaries an essential physical, economic, and cultural resource, and many of these tribes have substantial and often senior reserved water rights. Dams at the major reservoirs can store nearly 4 years of the basin's long-term average inflow, and they provide essential storage for municipal and agricultural needs, provide a multitude of recreational activities, and generate nearly 4,200 megawatts of hydropower that feed the Western power grids. Over 90% of the system's storage capacity resides in Lake Powell, formed by Glen Canyon Dam, and Lake Mead, formed by Hoover Dam. The operation of the system is governed by a complex body of legal agreements, including federal legislation, contracts, court decisions, and an international treaty with Mexico. Several of the operating agreements adopted in the last 15 years that govern the operation of Lake Powell and Lake Mead expire at the end of 2026, and that's why we are here today. These are the Colorado River Interim Guidelines for Lower Basin Shortages and Coordinated Operations for Lake Powell and Lake Mead. We refer to these shorthand as the 2007 Interim Guidelines, or the Guidelines, and the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plans, or the DCPs. This figure is plotting the natural flow into the basin for over the last approximately 100 years. By natural flow, we mean the flow that would have occurred absent human impacts, water use, or reservoir regulation. And what this figure is showing is that we have a highly variable hydrologic system on this basin, with a difference of nearly 20 million acre feet between the lowest year, which occurred in 1977, and the highest year, which occurred in 1984. When the interim guidelines were being developed, the basin's long-term average was 14.9 million acre feet. The impetus for the development of the guidelines was the low flows in the early 2000s. It was the lowest 5-year period on record. Since 2000, the basin has experienced a significant departure from that long-term average, with the most recent 24-year period averaging 16% less. This decline is due to increasing basin temperatures and related hydrologic effects, resulting in drier conditions throughout the basin. To recap, the long-term average leading up to the development of the 2007 interim guidelines was 14.9 million acre feet, but the most recent approximate 20-year period has averaged 12.5 million acre feet. While it's impossible to predict the future or know what to plan for in post-2026, climate science tells us that future temperatures in the basin will continue to warm and that we can expect an increased likelihood of experiencing prolonged droughts. This figure is plotting Lake Powell in darker blue and Lake Mead in the lighter blue storage and percent capacity since their filling. The precipitous drop in storage over the 5-year period from 2000 to 2004 is what motivated the development of the guidelines. As I said before, this was the driest 5-year period on record, with the average annual inflow ranging only 25 to 60% of average each year. System storage in the basin declined in half during this period, and by spring of 2005, Lake Powell was only 33% capacity, by far the lowest since its original filling in the 60s. And as such, Secretary Gail Norton challenged the basin states and Reclamation to develop a drought mitigation plan and to implement this plan by 2007. This ultimately became the 2007 interim guidelines. Since that time, the system has never recovered to those levels prior to the early 2000s and has generally declined as a result of dry hydrology coupled with basin water use. Currently, the combined storage of Lake Powell and Lake Mead is at 36% capacity or 36% full. This is an improvement from this time last year when the system capacity was at about 28%, but nonetheless, we are sitting at a low vulnerable state. Since the first year of operation under the interim guidelines in 2008, several new agreements and drought response actions have been implemented alongside other initiatives and planning studies that are not listed here. And those have been implemented and adopted in response to the changing hydrologic conditions in the basin. The adoption of the guidelines for an interim period through 2026 has provided an opportunity to gain valuable operational experience, and that operational experience is an important consideration when thinking about long-term operations. At the top of the diagram, we can see the agreements that expire in 2026 in orange, and alongside the two ongoing processes to modify Lake Powell and Lake Mead operations in both the near term and the long term. Here's a simple table comparing the long-term and the near-term planning processes that are currently ongoing for the Colorado River system, and the scopes and the durations of each are different. With respect to near-term operations, the scope of that effort is limited to specific sections of the guidelines. The goal is to develop the operational tools needed to address extreme drought and low water levels, and these tools are being developed through a separate NEPA process called the Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement process to develop a supplemental EIS to the original 2007 EIS for the guidelines. And this was initiated in November of 2022. The operational modifications to come out of this process would extend for 3 years from 2024 through 2026. In contrast, for longer term operations or the post-2026 process, Reclamation will need to revisit all sections of the 2007 interim guidelines, as well as other operating agreements that are set to expire in 2026, such as the DCPs. The scope is not yet determined. This public scoping process will help us determine that scope, including the duration of those guidelines. In the notice of intent, we state that we are interested in receiving specific input on how the purpose and the elements of the guidelines should be retained, modified, or eliminated to provide greater stability to water users and the public throughout the basin. Summarized from the 2007 Record of Decision, the purpose of the guidelines is to improve management of the Colorado River by considering trade-offs between the frequency and magnitude of reductions of water deliveries, provide a greater degree of predictability with respect to the amount of annual water deliveries for future years, particularly in the lower basin, and provide additional mechanisms for the storage and delivery of water supplies in Lake Mead to increase the flexibility of meeting water use needs from Lake Mead. The guidelines are comprised of 4 operational elements that are designed to meet that purpose, and those 4 elements are summarized here. First, there are shortage guidelines. These are prescribed volumes of lower basin shortages at specific Lake Mead elevations. Second element is with respect to coordinated reservoir operations. These are the guidelines for coordinated operations between Lake Powell and Lake Mead. The third element is the storage and delivery of conserved water. It is the mechanism for storage and delivery of conserved water in Lake Mead, or the ICS, intentionally created surplus mechanism. And then the fourth element is surplus guidelines. So guidelines to develop when surplus conditions exist in the lower basin. We call this our guidelines operational diagram. I will not go through this in detail, but the key takeaway is that this represents the structure of the guidelines. Lake Powell is on the left side and Lake Mead is on the right. At both reservoirs, there are elevation bands or tiers that contain guidelines for the annual releases if the reservoir is within that tier. At Powell, there are fixed volume or balancing releases. Balancing releases are done in consideration of Lake Mead elevations or equalization releases, which are similar in spirit. At Mead, releases are based on the condition that is determined by the secretary in the lower basin, either normal, surplus, or shortage conditions. In 2019, in response to the changing hydrologic conditions and increased risk of reaching critically low elevations at Powell and Mead, the Colorado River Basin drought contingency plans were adopted. These plans act as an overlay to the 2007 interim guidelines. They are essentially a combined set of operational guidelines that also expire in 2026. The key elements require additional savings and water savings contributions by the lower basin states, allow for additional flexibility for water storage and incentivize conservation, provide for drought response operations and demand management in the upper basin, and also triggered Mexico's binational water scarcity contingency plan, a component of Minute 323 with Mexico. In 2020, per the 2007 Record of Decision, Reclamation conducted a formal review of the 2007 interim guidelines, reviewing their effectiveness and documenting our operational experience. The review concluded that the guidelines were not sufficiently robust and additional actions were needed to reduce risk. And they also offered several considerations as to how to enhance effectiveness. Those considerations are enhanced flexibility and transparency for water users, expanded participation and conservation in basin-wide programs, increased consideration of the linkage that occurs through coordinated reservoir operations, and more robust measures to protect reservoir levels. I will now pass the presentation over to Amanda to describe the post-2026 process. I hope that I have provided some useful background and context this is also included in our notice of intent to inform and frame your scoping comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Carly. So I'm going to talk a bit about the post-2026 process. As Carly discussed, several of the operating agreements that govern the operation of Lake Powell and Lake Mead expire at the end of 2026. Through the post-2026 process, we will develop successor domestic agreements for the long-term operations and management of the Colorado River system beginning in 2027. The post-2026 process will be a multi-year NEPA process, which will be concluded in mid-2026 before the development of the 2027 annual operating plan for the Colorado River reservoirs begins. This process is focused on domestic actions. Now, there's also a parallel process through the International Boundary and Water Commission to develop successor agreements to Minute 323 with Mexico. While we are now in the scoping phase of this post-2026 process, which Russ is going to talk a little more about in a few minutes here, Reclamation also solicited pre-scoping input by publishing a Federal Register notice in June of 2022. This Federal Register notice requested input on the process and substantive elements for the post-2026 process. It also highlighted 3 changed circumstances in the basin since 2007. First off, the changed hydrologic conditions that have resulted in unprecedented drought and historically low reservoir conditions, as Carly has discussed. Second, the desire for full engagement and consultation of the basin tribes and Reclamation's commitment to engage with the basin tribes in a meaningful and transparent manner during the post-2026 process. And thirdly, the extraordinary cooperative process that has been forged between the US and Mexico since 2007 to develop and implement several significant international agreements on the Colorado River. In response to the Federal Register notice, Reclamation received 56 stakeholder letters signed by 82 unique stakeholders, including 11 tribes and 141 unique comment letters from concerned citizens. The input received was summarized in the pre-scoping summary report, which was published in January of 2023 and is available on Reclamation's post-2026 website. After reviewing the input that we received, Reclamation identified three key themes in the pre-scoping comments. First, future operational guidelines must be robust and adaptive. They must support proactive management to improve system stability and be capable of both withstanding a broad range of future hydrologic and operating conditions and minimizing system vulnerability. Second, future operational guidelines should recognize a holistic approach. They should focus on the long-term sustainability of both the basin's population and natural environment, minimize system vulnerability, and increase system resiliency. Lastly, future operational guidelines should consider alternative paradigms for operation of the system beyond a tiered approach to coordinated operation of Lake Powell and Lake Mead, which Carly discussed earlier. Reclamation is currently working to design and implement a stakeholder engagement process that is inclusive and transparent, that encourages meaningful input from tribes, states, partners, stakeholders, and the public. We are working to implement this commitment through prioritizing stakeholder technical education and technical outreach, creating a common technical understanding and developing new tools for engagement, as well as prioritizing outreach, leveraging existing groups, and creating new groups with the goal of enhanced tribal engagement across the basin. Reclamation will provide more specific information on the engagement structure and opportunities to engage as we move forward in the process. This figure shows you the proposed post-2026 process schedule. On the left side of the figure, you can see where we are now in the process. We published the notice of intent, or NOI, last month and are now in the scoping period. Scoping comments are due August 15th, 2023. Once the scoping period is over, we will then develop a release a scoping summary report summarizing the comments that we receive and identifying the anticipated purpose and need for the NEPA process. In the fall of 2023, the alternatives development phase of the process will start, and that will go through the spring of 2024. Reclamation will then work to prepare the draft environmental impact statement, or EIS, from the spring of 2024 through the fall of 2024. We anticipate publishing the draft EIS in December of 2024 with a public comment period following that publication. We will then spend most of 2025 and the beginning of 2026 developing the final EIS and the record of decision. And as mentioned earlier, we intend to have the new guidelines finalized by the middle of 2026 prior to the beginning of development of the 2027 annual operating plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Russ to talk about the scoping process.
Thanks, Amanda, and hello, everyone. I'm Russ Calejo. I'm the project manager for environmental compliance for the post-2026 process. I'd like to extend my welcome to you as well. This slide is just a general overview of the scoping process. A lot of these items have been mentioned previously, but we like it here in this one slide as a convenient spot. So the notice of intent published June 16th. We have a 60-day public scoping comment period, ends on the 15th of August. 60 days is longer than typical. Typically, it's a 30 to 45-day public comment period, but recognizing the complexity and interest in the post-2026 process, we thought the 60-day public comment period to start was a prudent step. We invite all Basin partner stakeholders and interested members of the public to provide oral and written comments. And finally, there'll be a scoping report published after the comment period ends. We anticipate publishing that in the fall, probably sometime in September. All right, so this is a slide that provides the general roadmap on providing comments in the scoping process. And it's organized in 3 columns, really, represented by the different colored boxes. And the first column on the left of the screen, considerations. So for the past 15, you want to consider the past 15 years of operating experience, the findings from the 2020 review of the 2007 interim guidelines, the themes that came out in the pre-scoping report, and the need for robust and adaptive operations. So those are the things to consider when thinking about developing your comments. In the middle box, light blue, is what we at Reclamation are seeking specific feedback on. So the first is the operational guidelines and strategies. Second is potential modifications to the purpose and elements of the 2007 interim guidelines. And the last bullet in that box, any other related issues that should be considered in the EIS. So that's what we're seeking feedback on. The last column, the last box that's yellow, is what the feedback will result in. What will it inform? And that is the following. It will inform the proposed federal action, the purpose and need, and finally the scope of the analysis. For example, the affected area, the geographic scope, and the time horizon or term of the analysis. So we presented a lot of information today, a lot of really great and helpful information. If you were to take home one slide to hang up on the wall in the office to inform folks of what's going on, this would be the slide I would choose as a summary of what to consider, what to provide feedback on, and how it will inform the process. All right, so this slide is a summary of ways to comment. And there's several different ways. First, during the public scoping meeting, we'll be taking oral comments today. There's also a web form via the project website, which is indicated on the slide there. You can also send an email to our post-2026 specific email address. We have a telephone hotline if you prefer to dial in and give your comment orally over the telephone. And finally, we have the old-fashioned way of sending a mail to the Bureau of Reclamation at that address. And I just want to highlight also in the top right corner of this slide, that 60-day comment period ends on August 15th.
And Russ, we do have some folks that are dialed in just on the phone. So would you mind reading this out to them? So if you're going on the phone and you want to jot things down, maybe grab a pen or a pencil here. And we're also putting this in the chat for everyone. If you want to copy and paste anything or be able to click on the links that will appear in your chat box here in Zoom. Okay,
I'll start at the top, or the first one, and try and talk slowly through it. So for the project website, that's www.usbr.gov/Colorado River Basin /post 2026. Next way to comment is send an email to the following address: CRB post 2026 @usbr.gov. Next method, telephone hotline. That number is 602-789-3889. And lastly, the mailing address is Bureau of Reclamation, attention post 2026, mail stop 84-55,000, PO Box 25007, Denver, Colorado 80225. All right, we also have other outlets to gain additional information, and that's listed on this slide. We have a project website, a place to send questions, and again, the project hotline. I'll go over the project website or say the project website again for folks on the phone: www.usbr.gov/Colorado River Basin /post2026. Send questions to our email, crbpost2026@usbr.gov. And finally, call the telephone line at 602-789-3889. And with that, I'll turn the remainder over back to Meg for the public comment session. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Russ, Carly, and Amanda for that presentation. And thanks to those of you listening with us today. As I mentioned at the beginning, you do have the option to submit any clarifying questions on the presentation you just saw using that Q&A button in your Zoom controls. Look for the two little talk bubbles, and if you click there, you can submit a question to the team. Also look there for any answers that have been provided by the team so far to questions from you or others. So that'll be going on in the background, but we want to reserve the remainder of today's meeting time, about 25 minutes, for anyone who might wish to submit a public comment verbally today. So let me explain how we're going to do that. And I should note, for those of you listening in Spanish, you of course have the option to submit a question in Spanish if you'd like. Same method, click on the Q&A and just type in your question in Spanish, and we'll work with our translators to get that question answered for you in Spanish. Likewise, if you'd like to provide a comment in Spanish, we can interpret that into English so that the reclamation team can understand. So certainly welcome any questions or comments in Spanish as well. Guidelines for our comments today. Your comments should be directed to the Bureau of Reclamation team rather than other commenters. It really is the Reclamation team that's here to listen and who will be taking your input into account. We do have close to 200 people on the webinar today, so we'll limit comments to 3 minutes so that we have time to hear from as many commenters as possible. And of course, if your comments are longer than 3 minutes, we encourage you to submit them in writing via the methods that Russ just described. And we'll share that information again before we wrap up. Finally, I'm sure this goes without saying, but this virtual event is designed to be viewed in homes across the country in real time. We never know what little ears might be in the room. So of course, profanity is not acceptable. So thank you for that. So if you would like to share a comment with us today, here's how to do it. Go ahead and click the raise hand button in your Zoom controls. If you're calling in by phone, you can press *9 on your phone, and that will raise your hand here in the Zoom room to let us know you have a comment to share. I'll call on commenters in the order your hands are raised. And apologies in advance, I'll have to guess how to pronounce your name when I call on you. I'll invite you to unmute. If you're on the phone, you might need to press *6 to unmute yourself. We'll ask you to state and spell your name when you begin your comment, and then you'll have 3 minutes, and this comment timer on the screen will be running to let you know when your 3 minutes are up. So with that, we will open the floor to anyone who has a comment to share. Go ahead and click that raise hand button or press *9 on your phone keypad if you're calling in by phone. All right. Seeing some hands up. Okay, so first we're going to go to Javier Gonzalez. You should be able to unmute.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. Javier Gonzalez, XAVIER-GONZLEZ. I'm the resource planning engineer for Hoover, Parker, and Davis Dams. I work for Western Area Power Administration in the Phoenix office. Ever since the guidelines took place, I've always had this pet peeve of the reason that Lake Powell and Lake Mead were in different operational periods. Lake Mead is on a calendar year-based period, and Lake Powell is on a water year period. Obviously, the guidelines were instituted because the elevations of the lake were going down. So Lake Mead has been harmed, in my opinion, as I've seen it, significantly by this period. So say, for example, when Lake Powell goes into, on October 1st, goes into a lower operating tier, and it's cutting releases to Lake Mead is still operating on the previous year's operation guidelines. And not until January 1st of the next year will it go into the other guidelines. So in other words, with Lake Powell having cut water to Lake Mead is still releasing water at higher levels because of the new guidelines or new tiers don't take effect until January 1st. Why can we not be on the same operational period? In my opinion, would be the water year. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right. Next we have Silvio Dorian Chalaru. You should be able to unmute.
Dorian is my name. I'm with Transoceanic LLC, USA. My question is simple. Why don't we consider importing massive water from Mexico to lower Colorado River? And when I say massive water, I mean billions of acre-foot per year. It is possible. It is feasible. It's not expensive. I haven't seen this consideration anywhere in the Bureau's documents. Although there is a patent, our patent, I don't want to advertise this, but it is possible to do it beyond our idea. So why not? That's my question.
Great, thank you. So that all comments that we're receiving verbally today are being noted for the record. If you're looking for a response to a question, the way that's happening is in the Q&A tool here in Zoom. So if anyone is looking for the team to share responses to questions, go ahead and click on that Q&A button and type in your question there, and they'll be reviewing and providing responses as time permits. But of course, sometimes comments include questions. We just won't be responding verbally to them today. So thank you for that comment. All right, next we have John Coffey.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. Okay, I have two things I want to say. On April 11th of this year, the New York Times reported that the Biden administration wanted the same percentage of water cut for both the Imperial Valley in California, Arizona, and Nevada. Why wasn't this done? And if the California farmers are not going to take the money from the federal government if the federal, excuse me, let me start again. If the California farmers of the Imperial Valley are not going to take the federal money to fallow their land and not use their land and let it go dry, then why don't they use the remainder of the money to cloud seed both the lower and upper basin of the Colorado River? In the Q&A, I cited a woman who wrote about cloud seeding for a scientific magazine. What she said was that in Dubai, in the Middle East, there were a few clouds, and they cloud seeded them, and then they got something they didn't expect. In Dubai, because they cloud seeded in the middle of the Middle East, it flooded. Furthermore, she reported in an article that cloud seeding of a small amount of clouds can produce a stadium full of snow. I think this would be the best way to refill the Hoover and Glen Canyon dams. What do you think of that? Hello?
Hi, we're not responding to questions right now. We're just taking comments for the record. So we're noting everything you're saying right now for the record as part of the comment period.
So do I need to say it again?
Nope, it's all on the record already.
And the stuff I typed in?
Yes, questions are not part of the record, so the questions we're answering today are just for clarification purposes. So we understand people might have questions as they're getting to be familiar with all this information and preparing to submit comments. So the questions are just for your information. And then anything that you'd like to have on record, you can submit verbally today or in writing via the methods that Russ described. And we'll go over those again before the end of the meeting. So you have 1 minute left if you wanted to say anything else. You can unmute. Okay, John Coffey, we're not hearing you. If you are speaking, you might need to unmute.
Sorry about that. Anyway, there's this institution called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's a branch of the UN. Have you guys, they're aware of the Colorado River going dry. They talk about it sometimes. Have you guys talked to them at any, or is that superfluous? Hello? Hello?
Again, great question. We're not responding to questions right now. So your question is noted for the record as part of your comment.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. All right, we have about 15 minutes left in the scheduled meeting time. I'm not seeing any hands up at the moment, but welcome anyone else who has a comment to share at this time to go ahead and click that raise hand button or press *9 on the phone to let us know that you have a comment to share. We'd love to hear from you. And again, if you do have a question and you're hoping for a response today, the place to share those is in the Q&A tool by typing those in. And that allows us to help gather responses from the full reclamation team that's here with us on the webinar today. I know we have a few open questions that we're working on preparing responses to. So if you're curious to see questions that are receiving responses, you can click on that Q&A button and you'll see questions and the answers that the team has provided. Otherwise, we're standing by to take any additional comments. Go ahead and click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone to let us know you want to share something. And I'm just going to jump back for a moment to that key slide that Russ shared that helps explain, what Reclamation is hoping you're thinking about as you consider commenting and what comments will inform. Just as a reminder, as you're thinking about what you might like to say. If anything, also option to submit in writing. Great. All right, I see one person who's a repeat commenter. We're going to take non-repeats first, and then we'll circle back if there's time to anyone who wants to have an additional 3 minutes. So Brett Simpson, go ahead. You'll need to click unmute.
Okay.
There you are.
Okay. I think one of the things. Oh, Brett Simpson, BRETTSIMPSON. I think one of the hard things is some of these questions as they come out, you'd really like an answer to, but again, as you state, no answers coming. everything I've read over the past couple of years, California has truly not committed to any of this. When 6 of the states in the basin got together for cuts over the past 2 years, California definitely made the grandstanding, in my opinion, position that they were not going to participate nor comply with anything that was going on with everything that I had kind of read. My question, I guess, posing it out there to the ether would be, until all the states are either on board or forced to be on board, pretty much isn't this a moot point? They keep stating that they're going to push their grandfathered water rights as priority and take what they need, want, desire. And it seems to me that most people realize that water is not something that just shows up. There is no infinite supply of. And until everyone's playing on the same page with the correct numbers, with the correct volume of water that's falling, with the correct breakdowns of everything, that truly this is just a can that keeps getting kicked down the road. Luckily, our forefathers thought long enough and hard enough in advance that they built these reservoirs for time of feast and to have in time of famine. And do we, as a populace of the US now, take these that have been put in place and basically start to say, you know, this is going to be a national vision and not just a 7-state vision? Many things are done over water. They used to say in the West is water is for fighting and whiskey is for drinking. And thank you very much. I got 38 seconds left, and you all have a great day.
Thanks so much for your comment. All right. Again, check the Q&A where the team is responding to questions live in writing. And we'll continue to take raised hands. As I said earlier, I see we have one person returning with an additional comment, but want to prioritize anyone who hasn't had a chance to share comment yet. I'm not seeing any new commenters. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over again. And I think I got your name wrong the first time, so I'm going to let you tell us your name after you unmute. Go ahead.
My name is Dorian from Transoceanic again. My comment is very short. The water is not infinite for Colorado, but we can have 2 or 3 times more water than we have in the Colorado, natural water than in Colorado, because the flow of Mexican rivers to Pacific Ocean is at least twice the Colorado, and it's possible to make other transfers too. So we have to think out of the box. We have to see how we solve this problem. So California will agree and will say, yes, we want to build these systems. Yes, we can do it. And everybody will have all the water and there will be no more fighting for it. It will be just drinking whiskey. That's why we have no fighting for water and drinking whiskey for all the states around Colorado. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have, let's see, looks like Stephen Zobel. Are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Perfect. Hey, good afternoon. You know, I keep hearing rumblings. That's what kind of got me on here as well, of the rumblings we hear, what I would call extremists, that we need to remove the Glen Canyon Dam. And what I just want to really talk about is, I really believe we need the ongoing operations of both the Glen Canyon Dam and the Hoover Dam, because it's crucial for the conservation of water resources and ensuring their availability in years to come. Those graphs showed how we see years where there's excess, where there's not. With these two infrastructures, they really play the significant role not only in water management, but also energy production and the regional economies. We know that these dams have been huge for our conservation efforts as they facilitate the collection and storage of water, but this stored water also can be systematically released during the drier periods, as we've seen. So while they've been really low, we're grateful we have them because they're keeping us moving in these times of drought. Moreover, I just see how they provide water to millions of people across several states, supporting, you know, what we need in our homes as well as agriculture. And it helps us cultivate crops in these semi-arid regions that would be impossible otherwise. I look at it from the energy perspective. Both of the dams contribute significantly to a renewable energy mix by generating hydroelectric power. And as we're pushing more toward electric vehicles and more of the electrification, we need as much of that as we possibly can, because it reduces our reliance on fossil fuels and lowers our carbon footprint. And then finally, both Glen Canyon and Hoover Dam are crucial components in really giving our regional economies a boost. They not only create jobs related to their maintenance and operations, but a thriving tourism industry for both of the locations. So I just want to get on the record, you know, I believe the preservation and continuous operation of both the Glen Canyon and Hoover Dam is crucial for our overall sustainable future, and really see that they play a pivotal role in water conservation, renewable energy generation, and economic sustainability. So thank you for your time, and thank you for holding this forum so we could all speak.
Thank you. All right, we've got just a few minutes left here in our scheduled time. I don't see any hands up right now, so let's give it one last call if anyone has a comment. Greg McGinnis. Oh. Nope. Looks like the hand went back down. Maybe that was an accidental click. All right, not seeing any other hands up, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Carly for a few closing remarks from the Bureau of Reclamation, and we'll also remind you all about the other ways to comment besides today's meeting.
Thank you all. Again, I would just like to say thank you for your input and for joining us here today, and that we look forward to your future engagement as this process moves along. So thank you and have a nice day.
Thanks. And yes, so just as a quick refresher, you do have until August 15th in this 60-day comment period to submit any comments. We have 2 more scoping meetings coming up tomorrow and next week. And again, there's a web form on the project website, as well as that email address as options for submitting comments, or you can use the telephone hotline or submit by mail. And I'll drop all of those options one more time in the chat for you all. And really just want to express appreciation for everyone's thoughtful participation today and your attention to this process. It is one that is complex and has a lot of different nuances to it. So all the different perspectives that you as stakeholders bring are really important to moving it forward successfully. Thanks everyone so much for your time and attention today. And with that, we are adjourned.